Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about the adult fantasy series that I finished in 2019. I already did a video talking about the young adult series that I finished in 2019, so I'll link that up in the cards if you're interested in watching it because I finished quite a few series last year. As for adult fantasy, I didn't do as good. I only finished 5 series total. As per my last video, I'm going to be telling you which books I actually read in 2019 because I didn't actually read all books in all the series this year. These are just series that I finished. So let's just get on into it. The first series I'm going to talk about is The Gilded Cage by Vic James. This includes The Gilded Cage, The Tarnished City, and Bright Ruin. So I actually did read all 3 of these books in 2019. However, The Gilded Cage was a reread for me. I reread it on audio because I wanted to finish the series, but I couldn't remember anything that happened in this book, so I did need to reread it before I read the second and third books. So this series is a dystopian fantasy, and it takes place in an alternate modern setting in Britain where there are people who have magical abilities called skill. In Britain at this time, the people with skill, who are more of like an elite upper class, enslaved the non-skilled people for 10 years. They're known as slave days, and every single person is required to do slave days. So in this book, we follow several characters, but the main characters are Abby and Luke, who are brother and sister, and they are taken away to do their slave days. And they are working at the estate of this very, very wealthy, influential, skilled family. And the name of the estate is known as Kynaston. And Kynaston is home to 3 boys, 3 brothers, Gavin, Jenner, and Cillian. And Jenner, even though he's part of this elite, powerful family, has no magical ability. In the first book, we find out that Luke is actually not sent to Kynaston, and he is sent to Millmore, which is this really, really oppressive slave town. And then the story kind of goes from there. To begin, I would definitely recommend this book if you like books that are not super heavy on the fantasy or the magic system. While this book does have magic in it, it is not thoroughly explained. You just kind of have to go with the flow. Also, if you like the dystopian setting of an oppressed underclass having to fight for rights against an elite upper class, then this is definitely a series that you would like. The first book does focus a lot on like the political machinations, which I personally like, but if you don't like that, then you might want to steer clear of this series. It is very political in the first book. The second book is full of much more action, and that is my favorite of the series because Vic James really threw some twists and turns in there that I was not seeing. I think if you're just getting into fantasy and you don't want something with a heavy magic system, that you should check the series out. Also a good intro into fantasy series because all the books are really short. I think each one is 400 pages or under. While this wasn't my favorite series I've ever read, I am glad that I read it and I had a lot of fun. The next series I'm going to be talking about is the Powder Mage Trilogy by Brian McKellen. This includes Promise of Blood, The Crimson Campaign, and The Autumn Republic. The only book I read in 2019 was The Autumn Republic, the finale. So this is an adult flintlock fantasy, and it is very, very military focused. We follow a multitude of characters. Adamant, who's like a detective inspector, Thomas, who is a high-ranking officer in an army, his son, Daniel Two-Shot, and a sorcerer called Bo. In this series, powder mages ingest gunpowder, and that gives them the ability to like see further distances and have more endurance and that kind of thing. But that's not the only type of magic that's in this series. There's also different types of sorcery. There are gods in this series that do come to Earth and meddle in the lives of humans. I really enjoyed all of the different character stories and how they came together in this series. I definitely think that Adamant and Bo, the sorcerer, were the 2 that ended up really capturing my interest. Like I said, this book is very military focused. It does focus on military strategies and battles between one country and another invading country. The politics are not overly heavy in this series, but there's enough to give context as to why this war is happening. The intervention of the gods was not very heavy in the first 2 books, but was very heavy in the 3rd book. And gods and mythology and that kind of thing within a series is not my favorite thing to read about, so I personally didn't like that as much in the 3rd book. But this actually was a really, really good series. I actually really liked it, and I'm really interested to read Brian McKellen's other series that takes place in the same world, but I think follows other characters. If you enjoy Flintlock fantasy, I highly suggest giving this trilogy a try. The next series I'm going to talk about is the Study series by Maria V. Schneider. This includes Poison Study, Magic Study, and Fire Study. In 2019, I read Magic Study and Fire Study. Poison Study is a book that I picked up because of BookTube. I actually had heard other booktubers talk about this, and this is a very good book if you're just getting into fantasy, because just like the Gilded Cage trilogy, the magic is not too heavy and the magic system is not too complicated, and it's very, very fast-paced. Poison Study is definitely my favorite book in the series. I just flew through it when I was reading it. In Poison Study, we're introduced to Yelena, who is on technically like death row for murdering a man, and she's given the opportunity to either go through with her execution or become a poison taster for the commander who's in charge of their city. So Yelena takes the opportunity to become a poison taster. Some things that I really like about this series is I found that the dynamic between the main character and the love interest was done so well. I love Valak. He's a love interest in this book. He is one of the most interesting characters. He's an assassin, and I absolutely love him. Also, the next two books take place in a really, really interesting setting. The people in Magic Study, Yelena's people, actually live in the trees, and it's kind of like this jungle setting, which is a complete contrast to the setting of this book. And the third book also takes place in that similar setting. So we go from a very, very rigid, materialistic setting to a jungle setting and a school setting. So I found that really, really interesting. The magic system, while it didn't have that many parameters, meaning that Yelena could basically do lots of different types of magic, or she had many different skills, the magic system I found to be very, very interesting, at least what we knew about it. Yelena is a soul finder, meaning she can find people who are dead or about to die, but she has more than those type of abilities. She's able to heal, she's able to talk to animals, so her magic is very, very broad. Which is also one of the downfalls of this book, because I think that the magic needed more structure and it was just too all over the place. But I think this is a really, really good series if you're looking to get into fantasy. They're very quick reads and a lot of fun. And I do want to pick up the continuation of the series. I think it is like in the same world, but it follows, this story arc is complete and it follows the same characters, same world, but it's a completely different story. So I do want to pick that up eventually. I know my library has it on ebook because I really did enjoy Poison Study quite a bit. The next trilogy I'm going to be talking about is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. This includes Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. The Farseer trilogy follows our main character, whose name is Fitzchivalry, and he is the bastard son of a dead prince, and he is raised in the royal castle known as Buckkeep, but he is looked down upon because he is a bastard, and he's treated very, very poorly, and he has no claim on the throne or any type of official title. So because of that, the king turns him into an assassin, and he learns how to use different types of poisons to kill people. And we basically follow Fitzchivalry from a child, first moving into Buckkeep with the king, all the way through his like early 20s, which is in book 3. So it's a long time that we follow him, and the story is just so intricate. The characters are just so well written. I absolutely loved reading about Fitz's life and just all of the different conflicts that he's constantly faced with, and how he really is never able to live his own life. He is constantly in the service of someone or another, and when he tries to live his own life and marry a girl that he loves and do things for him, he's just conflicted about it because he knows he has a duty to his king and his kingdom. This series for me personally is so bittersweet. It really, really pulled at my heartstrings. I absolutely loved it, and I am going to read the rest of the books in the Farseer realm eventually by Robin Hobb. The next series I finished was the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, and this includes The Black Prism, The Blinding Knife, The Broken Eye, Blood Mirror, and The Burning White. In 2019, I read all of the books in the Lightbringer series except for The Black Prism. In this series, we also follow a multitude of characters, the main ones being Gavin Guile, who is a prism. In this world, people can draft different colors of light, and these different colors of light do things, but a prism can draft the entire spectrum of colors, and Gavin is almost like an emperor. He's treated as a holy figure. He's incredibly powerful. And then we're introduced to his bastard son, Kip, who comes from like the country and is constantly putting himself down, saying he's fat and stupid. But then we learn that Kip has talents of his own. And currently in this world, the Jaspers, which is the country in which Gavin and Kip reside, is under threat of the White King, who is using these different spectrums of color to create whites, which are very dangerous beings. So this book in this series is very, very intricate. We have a whole cast of characters. All of them add something to the plot. There are assassins in this book. There are gods in this book. There are royals in this book. There's romance in this book. There's just everything that you could think of was put into the series. I really enjoy how Kip grew as a character because he's just absolutely nothing like he was at the beginning of the story. He matured so much and learned so much. Even Andros, which is Gavin's father and Kip's grandfather, was an incredibly endearing, interesting character that had multiple layers and motivations. I will say that this series keeps you guessing. You don't know which character is doing things for what reasons and if these reasons are good. And it's definitely a book where you cannot pinpoint who is going to do what at any given time. So if you like books like that and you like really, really, really well-written characters and an interesting world and a very structured magic system, I would definitely recommend reading this series. And these books are quite dense. Each one is 800 to 1,000 pages, so do expect to invest a lot of time in these books, but in my opinion, it's well worth it in the end. Alright, so that is it. Those are the 5 adult fantasy series that I finished in 2019. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little bell icon so you can get notified when I post videos. I will see you soon in another video. Bye!